And this is video released just a few days ago by the U.S. Navy showing the USS Carney shooting down a drone fired by Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. We've now learned this morning that a missile fired by Yemen's Houthi rebels struck a Norwegian-flagged tanker in the Red Sea today off the coast of Yemen. A Houthi military spokesperson issued a video statement saying rebels fired on that vessel when it, quote, rejected all warning calls. I want to talk more about that, so let's bring in a guest now. Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defensive Democracies. He's commanded several U.S. Navy ships and has served as the policy director for the Senate Armed Services Committee. Again, joining us now live to discuss all of this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me.
First off, I just want to ask you the significance of this attack, because we have seen quite a few of them going on in the Red Sea. So what is the significance here of a Norwegian ship being attacked? My understanding is that it appeared that it was possibly heading toward Israel.
So the Houthi attacks have really expanded at sea. There have been a lot in the vicinity of U.S. Navy ships. So you've seen the Carney and previously the Thomas Hudner have shot down quite a few either drones or cruise missiles. But this attack on the Norwegian ship is a real signal to us that, as a country that relies heavily on maritime transit around the world and transport around the world and the trade of goods, the United States wants to keep the sea lanes of communication free, which means we need to work closely with allies and partners to make sure ships like this Norwegian tanker don't get hit by adversary or terrorist groups, as happened here. So this is going to lead to either some kind of expanded coalition patrol where U.S. Navy and friendly Navy ships will escort groups of tankers through, or we have to aggressively strike the positions the Houthis are firing from at these ships. But one of those two things has to happen over the next week or two.
And I know you just kind of touched on this here, but do we see any sort of end in sight to the attacks on the cargo ships? We've mentioned it time and time again, but this essentially just keeps happening.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent point. And similarly, the 90-plus attacks now on U.S. forces in Syria and Iraq, the way that these eventually end is the way that General Frank McKenzie, the former U.S. Central Command commander, said recently, which is that we have to actually deter the Houthis and the other Iranian proxy groups by striking them where they launch from, and much more aggressively, not these kind of like small hits on empty or unmanned logistics facilities that's happened 3 or 4 times in response to the 90 strikes against U.S. forces. But, to stop both these maritime strikes and the strikes against U.S. forces, we probably need to do a comprehensive takedown of the launch facilities of all IRGC, or Iranian proxy groups.
And another big topic that has been developing here, we learned about this a short time ago. Israel is reportedly meeting over with Hezbollah, and they are trying to say, stop firing from Lebanon into Israel. Is this actually expected to go anywhere? Will these discussions lead to any changes, or are those missiles still going to be fired at Israel by Hezbollah?
So it's an interesting thing. I mean, right now, Hezbollah clearly could fire quite a few more missiles or rockets. It's estimated they have upwards of 200,000 short-range mortars, rockets, or missiles, or even precision-guided missiles that they could fire at Israel. And obviously, a very, very small percentage of this is happening. So I think what the Israelis are saying is, look, this nuisance fire you're doing is trapping a lot of our capabilities and capacity up north. It's stopping us from farming properly. It's driving people from their homes. Even if you just continue this nuisance fire, at some point, we'll have to hold you accountable and move you back. And so I think what they're doing is trying to give a realistic discussion with Hezbollah. I doubt that they'll get the solution they want. First, because Hezbollah really isn't motivated to help Israel. And second, because I don't know that Hezbollah has complete control over all these smaller rocket and mortar formations that fire into Israel.
And Netanyahu has now said that he and the U.S. do disagree on what happens post-Hamas. Once Hamas is destroyed, what's going to happen there in Gaza. Does that show any sort of, I guess, break between the U.S. and Israel, or is everything still aligned between the two?
Well, I think I'd have to, split that up. Are we aligned on the need to destroy Hamas? Yes. Are we aligned on what the day after looks like in Gaza? Probably no. And look, Israel's moved a little bit on this. I think a week ago, there was reason to believe that Israel understood that it was not going to be occupying Gaza. It was not in the best interest of Israel, the international community, or the Palestinians for Israel to occupy Gaza after this offensive. I think the far right portion of Netanyahu's government's pulling on him a little bit. We'll have to see what happens on this. I think we're going to end up with an international force occupying Gaza temporarily after the Israelis complete their ground operations. And I think eventually we're hoping for a Palestinian Authority to lead it, heavily funded by the Saudis and other Arab Gulf states.
And my last question for you here. We know, of course, that we've seen Blinken travel over to Israel. We've seen Biden travel there as well. This week, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is going to visit Israel and meet with Netanyahu and other leaders. What do we expect could come from that meeting?
Well, I think Jake Sullivan's going to go in to kind of push on can you get this ground offensive, this second part of the ground offensive over quicker? And I think what he's going to hear back is, they have to be careful not going too fast. A, they may not destroy Hamas, but B, you could, in fact, have higher levels of civilian casualties. I think in the end, the United States will have to defer to Israel on how they execute the war plan. But I think Sullivan will make sure that Netanyahu understands that while he will continue to get the equipment, the supplies, the munitions that Israel needs, the United States is very interested in the rapid conclusion of the ground offensive.
All right, Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and provide some context into all of this. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
One of the things I would say is just that the Israeli, we've been watching closely these criticism of the Israeli targeting efforts. I've worked very closely with the Israeli Defense Forces over the years, including exercises with targeting. The Israelis do targeting process in the same way the U.S. military does. The problem here is the ability Hamas had to build tunnels that were 80 meters underground, and it just requires, unfortunately, 2,000-pound kind of bunker buster bombs to destroy that. And so I think the criticism of the Israeli targeting process has been a little unfair and off base. They didn't start this war, and they're using the equipment they have and the processes they have to try to rapidly end it.
All right, thank you again for taking the time to be here with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.